Hey everyone, welcome back to Kalecgos, and this is my Sunwell tips and min-max guide for mages, where the main focus is on how to optimize the boss encounters from a mage perspective based on what I learned from clearing Sunwell in the PTR. If you don't already know the encounters, then feel free to check out my 45-second boss guide for the Sunwell, which should get you most of the way there on the encounters, and the link is in the description. And if you want to skip ahead to certain encounters, then the timestamps are also in the description. Otherwise, I cover them in order, first starting with Kalecgos. But before moving on, I just want to caveat that these tips and optimizations are based around the strategies and raid composition that we're running in Fusion, which may be different than the strategies your raid is employing and thus may not directly apply. So just keep that in mind in case your raid does the encounters differently. And also, if you see optimizations and tips that I didn't cover here or have suggestions on how to further improve these optimizations, then please leave a comment on how you think us mages could min-max these encounters better, or head to my Discord through the link in the description and add to our discussions there. Lastly, not all the gameplay that you'll see in this video or in my PTR VODs will match up with all of my recommendations here, and that's because some of these optimizations I didn't think about until after the fact, including some optimizations right while making this guide, so definitely stick to the recommendations over everything you see in the VODs. Alright, so now let's start with Kalecgos. DPS wise, there isn't too much to mention for this encounter, as during progression you'll want to save cooldowns for the demon phase and are thus unlikely to get 2 uses of your 3-minute cooldowns. The one time you could get 2 uses if you're lucky enough to get ported down right away, otherwise save your cooldowns for when you first go down. Additionally, when down below, stack semi-close to Kalecgos in hopes that he buffs you, and when you're up top, watch for debuffs, as the blue and white debuffs are your friends, and if you get them, you want to pump while they're up, and the purple and black are your enemies, mainly the purple as it increases your cast time by 100%. So if you get the purple, I recommend blocking it off, which will also reset your arcane buff at debuff stacks. Which brings me to my next point, which is that you shouldn't need to wear arcane res for this fight, and you can block off the arcane buff at debuff right when the force stack is about to hit you, thus helping out the healers by avoiding the arcane damage and also resetting your stacks. So due to our ice block ability, you shouldn't need to wear arcane res for this fight. Additionally, you can do this twice in the fight as long as you save cold snap until after your first ice block. If you're lucky enough to get one of the first 2 portals, then this means you'll have 2 ice blocks to help the healers out when you return up top from the Shadow Realm. Finally, only decurse once the duration of the curse drops below 15 seconds, otherwise you'll just be wasting your mana and GCDs because it'll just bounce to other players. Brutallus is a straightforward tank and spank for us, but there are some things you can do to min-max in this encounter. First off, it's a long fight, and it's unlikely that you'll be getting an innervate, and you may even have the Shadow Priest swap to another group depending on your raid's healer situation, so you'll have to perform regen rotations for this fight. So the first tip is that if Brutallus is facing your side, only start the frost bolts of your regen rotation after a slash has gone out. Otherwise, depending on your haste, the pushback on your frostbolt can mess up your rotation. So as you can see here, I keep casting Arcane Blast until after he slashes, and then I start the 3 frostbolts. Otherwise, you don't get the last hasted Arcane Blast. Also, it goes without saying, but don't start an evocation until after he's slashed, or it'll interrupt your evocate. Also, for regen rotations, only perform them when you aren't using your cooldowns, as you want to be spamming Arcane Blast during your cooldowns. Typically what I do is spam Arcane Blast until less than 20% mana, then I evocate, which brings me back up to almost full mana, and I continue spamming Arcane Blast so that I have enough mana depleted for my second gem and pot usage, which should line up with your second trinket to be able to continue spamming Arcane Blast. Then what you want to do, and this brings me to my next point, perform enough regen rotations so that you're close to full mana when you go to use your second set of 3-minute cooldowns, so that you can spam Arcane Blast the entire time those cooldowns are up. But wait until Icy Veins, Arcane Power, and your third trinket use all come off cooldown for that last usage so that they're all lined up and all used at the same time. Preferably also pop these cooldowns when you use Meteor Slash on your side so that your second Icy Vein usage mitigates the pushback from the Meteor Slash, which again brings me to my next point, which is that you should use Icy Veins when Brutallus is Meteor Slashing your side, that you can ignore the pushback of the slash. Note that I didn't always do this in my PTR attempts, so please feel free to shame me in the comments. And my last 2 notes are that if your raid DPS is low and you're looking at a 5.5 minute kill or longer, then you should use Mana Tide right away at the start of the fight so that you get a second Mana Tide later on in the fight. And lastly, you can block off burn, so hold your cold snap until after that second Icy Veins usage, or until you get a second burn if you're that unlucky. Felmyst is also simple, but let's walk through a few things to min-max your damage. First, for cooldown management, there's always about 3 minutes between the ground phases, so always pop your cooldowns during each ground phase, and each ground phase is also over a minute long, so you should still separate your Icy Veins from your Heroism Bloodlust, because you'll have time to do so. Additionally, this isn't a healer-intensive fight, so you can likely get an Innervate at the start during Heroism/Bloodlust, and 6 minutes later in the fight when the Innervate comes off cooldown. Keep blasting Felmyst until she flies away, and if you have a Parse Brain and are thinking of not doing that so that you can go AoE the skeletons more, know that the skeletons don't count towards your Parse. So even if you have Parse Brain, keep blasting Felmyst until she flies away. Then go hard on the skeletons and Super Sapper the first ground phase, Goblin Sapper the next phase of skeletons, and then you can Super Sapper again the third time if you get a third time. Also, after the skeletons are dead, swap to a spirit weapon with spirit enchant and a spirit wand so that you can get extra mana regen during the fight phase, and then swap back when she's getting ready to land. Also invis during that fight phase so that you can drop threat. What this allows you to do is that when she's getting ready to land, you can run out to where she's landing and you can start arcane blasting her. As you can see here, I do that, but I forgot to invis, so I noticed at the last second that I was actually right below the tank and threat, and thus I blinked away and aborted the plan. However, if I had invis, then I could have gotten some early blasting in before she was back in position. Lastly, save your ice block for when you get encapsulated, not someone in your party. That said, if it's the second phase and you still have Cold Snap up, then you could simply ice block if someone in your party gets encapsulated. However, blinking out is also easy to do, and overall I recommend blinking out and save ice block for if you get encapsulated, because you'll save your party by ice blocking off that encapsulate. And if you're enjoying this guide, please like and subscribe and drop me a follow at twitch.tv/Criteria. It really helps me out, and you guys' positive comments actually really mean a lot. And hit up my Discord to ask questions or discuss recent content. The invite link is in the description. First thing with twins and cooldown management is that you should delay your Heroism/Bloodlust by 30 to 60 seconds in order to avoid threat issues. You want to stay below the off tank on this fight so that when the main tank gets stunned through Confounding Blow, Sacrolash doesn't run up to the ranged on the balcony. And the problem is that if you pop Heroism/Bloodlust and all cooldowns at the start, it's likely that you'll be high on threat. For me, here you can see that even though we delayed Heroism, I still rocketed up on threat, so consider delaying your group's Heroism/Bloodlust and all cooldowns until even 60 seconds into the fight. That said, definitely blow all cooldowns in Phase 1 and don't conserve mana in Phase 1, as this fight is all about simply getting through Phase 1, so even if you go into Phase 2 that's fine. Next thing is obvious, but absolutely ensure you watch for Conflag being cast on you and blink out immediately if it is. Don't risk it, don't finish your cast, just get out. And then once you've blinked out, ice block and stay in the ice block until the Conflag hits you, and then you can run back into the group. Also, you should ice block off high burn snacks to help out the healers, and save your cold snap until Phase 2 or until you've used that first ice block. Lastly, watch for pyrogenics on Alethus on the off chance your enhanced shamans die or can't get it purged for some reason, so that you can take off the debuff through spellsteal. Muru is a really fun fight for us with a lot to do, so I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. First, for cooldown management, pop all cooldowns at the start and use your trinket when it comes off cooldown, but then hold your second arcane power and your third trinket use until Heroism/Bloodlust are popped in Phase 2. Also, since Phase 2 is only going to be a minute long and you'll have Heroism and Bloodlust for 40 seconds of that phase, you won't have time to fit in 40 seconds of Heroism/Bloodlust, then 20 seconds of Icy Veins, and then another 20 seconds of Icy Veins from a Cold Snap. So instead, use your second Icy Veins for Arcane Explosion spam on the adds in Phase 1, and then you can Cold Snap during Phase 2 to use Icy Veins after the Heroism and Bloodlust runs out in Phase 2. For the adds, Arcane Explosion them when Void Sentinel isn't alive, and also position yourself at the edge of the Darkness Circle. So that way, if you jump for your Arcane Explosion, which you should do to ensure it has leeway, then you can hit Muru while also hitting the adds, as you see here. Another little trick is that the Void Spawns take a second to activate, so you can Arcane Explosion on them before you do your first Frost Nova, again, as you see here. Be sure to also use explosives on them off CD, but don't worry about the first wave, as your Warlocks will enslave a bunch of them on that wave, so instead just single target the unmarked Void Spawns. And lastly, if you can manage to spell steal Spell Fury from the Shadow Sword Fury Mage, then this is great for an instant cast Flame Strike on the Humanoid adds, and then instant Arcane Blast on the Void Sentinel to restack your Arcane Blast debuff. That said, it can be difficult to spell steal this buff, as your enhanced shaman should be purging it as soon as they see it, and can't delay their purge as they don't always know when you're available to spell steal, because you won't always be available to spell steal. The buff freezes you in place, and we need to be able to move out to the Void Sentinels to Frost Nova the adds and Arcane Explosion them, so your enhanced shaman can't wait. But that said, definitely try and spell steal the buff when you can, as it's a nice little DPS increase and a lot of fun. Kil'jaeden is also really fun, and I think it probably beats Muru for most fun fight of the instance. First thing is positioning. You want to be close to the orbs, as you see here, so that you can ensure they die before they get out of range, so you ensure your raid leader lets you position accordingly. Next, cooldown management is tricky here because we're frequently getting the 25% haste buff from the Dragon's Breath, so trying to separate that buff and Icy Veins and Heroism/Blood Loss is just kind of a shit show. Not to mention drums in the future when we have even more haste from our gear. But I think overall what could work best is use cooldowns at the start and then Icy Veins before the transition to 55%. Your second Icy Veins, as 55% is where we should pop Heroism, as it should be outside of a Dragon Haste buff, and it's also right when ads spawn, so you can use Arcane Power here as well and go ham on the ads with Arcane Explosion and Heroism/Blood Loss. On that note, when AEing the ads, ensure you're jumping for leeway at max range on them so that you can move away from the incoming Shadow Spikes that are cast on the melee or ad tank. For back to cooldown management, after this point in the fight, just focus on trying to use Icy Veins outside of the Dragon Breath buff, and using Arcane Power with the Dragon Breath buff. So your idea is to separate out the haste stacking, because otherwise you're going to have wasted haste. And then also Dragon Breath is 25% versus Icy Veins is 20%, so you should use Arcane Power with the higher haste buff. It's tricky to find the timing, but just try your best. Also, use your Eva Cape before that 55% transition so that you have full mana during that Heroism/Blood Loss to ensure maximum spamming of Arcane Explosion. Note that it's not what I did here, but I hadn't thought about optimizing this fight yet, so definitely don't copy what I'm doing here on the video. A few other things, it's an 8+ minute fight, so remind your Resto Shaman to use Mana Tide within the first couple minutes so that you can get a second use of Mana Tide. And for regen rotations, try to only perform them when low on mana, as we get a lot of mana from the Dragon Breaths. And also the movement and the stopping of DPS during the Dragon Shield also helps with our mana by resetting our debuff stacks. So again, don't do too much regen rotation unless you're really low on mana. On that note, if you didn't know, any damage you do while under the shield is also reduced by 95%, so don't bother casting damaging abilities while the shield is up. And another little thing, when you run in to stack for breaths and shield, blink into the stack to ensure you get there in time so that you don't end up missing a breath, as that's huge for our DPS, and then you can run back out with the movement reduction immunity provided from the breath. And when running back out, remember your exact position and run directly to it in order to help everyone get a good spread once again. Lastly, save your Cold Snap until you've blocked off a Fire Bloom debuff, as it's likely that you'll get more than one Fire Bloom throughout this fight, and it helps to block that off. And that's it for Kil'jaeden in all 6 fights. Enjoy these fights, and especially Muru and KJ, as they're definitely the most fun and challenging fights of this expansion, and as we get more haste from gear, they'll be even more fun to min-max and optimize. So head to my Discord if you want to keep up on min-max strategy, the link is in the description, and also if you like the content, please hit the like and subscribe, it helps me out a lot, and also please drop a follow at twitch.tv/Kateria to catch the upcoming Sunwell launch race live, as well as future speedruns and Sunwell GDKPs with Fusion. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy Sunwell, it's a lot of fun. And also stay tuned for another bonus clip featuring Baron.
More to your right, Cassie. More to your right. More to your right. More to your right. More to your right. A little more. Keep Cassie up. He's dead.
No.
I'm just gonna eat a fucking massive hit here. When this thing comes, I'm gonna eat a fucking massive hit. All right. I want you to Celstral. I want you to DI me. DI me right now. DI me.
What is
DI me right now.
on? Goodbye, IU.
Keep me up. I have Stomp coming in 3.
Bailey, eat some of this meteor slash if you can.
Drop it.
Stomp
Stomp
needs to get out. I'm gonna die
Keep
to
me up.
slash.
How many we got? Alright, I gotta move
Ooh, we
to
got
the other
another.
side now.
That's right, we got the second Mana Tide coming
Keep me
back
up.
up. Let's
Turn,
go.
zoom.
Move yourself in group 3.
Keep me up, please. I'm gonna get hit with a 4-stack here soon. There's 4-stack. We got it. We're gonna make it.
The DI play. What a gamer you are, dude. Holy shit.
If it would have happened when I wanted it to, I had
What a
group-
god.
That was
I love
insane, dude.
I had
I love Baron.